commercialization program. But first, discussion will be on the 2020 budget. President Muhammadu Buhari has presented a record 2020 budget of about 11 trillion naira to the joint session of the National Assembly. The budget is the first spending plan of the president's second term after his re-election in February. The president says the goals is for the 2020 Appropriation Act to come into effect on January 1st, 2020, as he reaffirms Nigeria's commitment to meet its debt service obligation. Tagged budget of sustaining growth and job creation, the sum of 2.46 trillion naira is proposed for capital projects, with increase in the budget for National Human Rights Commission from 1.5 billion to 2.5 billion. Here is Adamu Sambo's report to set the tone for the discussion on this first segment of the program tonight.
The National Assembly and the executive arm of the Buhari presidency are now very much on the same page is not in doubt. And as the president lays the 2020 appropriation bill for consideration, the ambience in the hallowed chambers clearly indicates unity of purpose as well as avowed commitment by all to accelerate the pace of socio-economic development and enhance the welfare of Nigerians, political differences notwithstanding. The 10.33 trillion naira budget proposal presented by the Nigerian leader is made up of 2.14 trillion naira capital expenditure, 4.88 trillion naira for recurrent debt service obligation of 2.45 trillion naira, 556.7 billion naira statutory transfers, as well as sinking fund of 296 billion naira.
The main emphasis will be completion of as many ongoing projects as possible, rather than commencing new ones. MDAs have not been allowed to admit new projects into their capital project for 2020, unless adequate provision has been made for the completion of all ongoing projects.
The budget is predicated on a conservative oil price benchmark of $57 per barrel, oil production of 2.18 million barrels per day, an exchange rate of 305 naira to a dollar, real GDP growth of 2.93%, while inflation is expected to remain slightly above single digits.
Accompanying the 2020 budget proposal is a finance bill for your kind consideration and passage into law. The draft finance bill proposes an increased VAT rate from 5 to 7.5%. The additional revenues will be used to fund health, education, and infrastructure programs. As the states and local governments are allocated 85% of all VAT revenues, we expect to see greater quality and efficiency in their spending.
As the government proposes, the 2020 budget is expected to be financed by 8.15 trillion naira oil, non-oil, and other revenues, while the deficit of 2.18 trillion naira will be funded through new foreign and domestic borrowings.
Our government remains committed to ensuring the equitable sharing of economic prosperity. Our focus on inclusive growth and shared prosperity underscores our keen interest in catering for the poor and most vulnerable. Accordingly, we are revamping and improving the implementation of the National Social Investment Program through the newly created Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development.
With Ministry of of works and housing, power and transportation getting the lion's share of capital allocation, the budget has, amongst other priorities, strengthening macroeconomic environment, enhancing critical infrastructure, accelerating the pace of socio-economic recovery, as well as achieving the objectives of massive job creation and poverty reduction.
We need to quickly review the fiscal terms for deep offshore oil fields to reflect the current realities and for more revenue to accrue to the government. We estimate that this effort can generate at least $500 million United States dollars additional revenue for the federal government in 2020 and over $1 billion from 2021. We remain committed to prudently planning for our future economic prosperity.
While commending the lawmakers for their renewed sense of cooperation, understanding and support with the executive arm in the task of taking Nigeria to the next level, the president also appreciated Nigerians for renewing his administration's mandate to continue with the Change Nigeria enterprise, which he promised will be delivered.
I thank you most sincerely for your patriotic resolve to collaborate with the executive in the short and long term.
More details on the 2020 budget will be provided by the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Shamsuna Ahmed, in the coming days. In Abuja, Adamu Sambu, NTA News.
2020 budget presented by President Muhammadu Buhari to the joint session of the National Assembly. Well, the program is Tuesday Live. Tonight is two segments, and the first segment is on the budget. And to discuss that, I have a team here. But before then, Tuesday Live is an audience participatory program. At some point, the lines will be open, and when we are told to you, go straight to the point, raise your concerns, ask your questions, even to the guests. They have all the capacity to deliver on that. And when we do that, turn down the volume of your television set to avoid the hallback. Also, at some point on the program, we shall take some tweets also on the program. And on this note, on the second part of the program, we shall also have reports dotting the landscape of Nigeria, precisely Kaduna, Lagos, and Port Harcourt on the issues of gas flaring. Well, to the first segment of the program, I'm being joined tonight by the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs, Ajuri Ngalale. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Also, Program Manager, Nigerian Gas Commercialization Program, Office of the Minister of State for Petroleum, Justice Derafeka.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you. Mr. Charles Majomi, Team Lead, Gas Portfolio, Facility for Oil Sector Transparency and Reform in Nigeria, Foster of the UK's Department of International Development, DFID, Development Partners to the Nigerian Gas Flare Commercialization Program. Good to have you.
My pleasure, thank you.
Also tonight, Dr. Inemo Samiema, Niger Delta Stakeholder Coordinator, Center for Peace Development and Child Welfare. Good to have you on Tuesday Live tonight.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Along the program, we'll be joined by two guests from our Lagos Network Center. If they are true, we introduce them. If they are not said, we can see them tonight. Right to the far right there, we have Mrs. Adure Jo Ezigbo. She is the President, Nigerian Gas Association at our Lagos Network Center. Good to have you, madam. Welcome to Tuesday Live. Okay, to her right is Balazaka, public analyst, also from our Lagos Network Center. Good to have you tonight on Tuesday Live. Thank you very much. Well, to the first segment of the program, the first few minutes, let's go straight to the point, starting with Ajulo. Flashback 2019, when the budget was presented, and today when it was presented, I quite know that you will have an idea of what the atmosphere was. And today, you could hear Mr. President, let me quote him copiously. He said, "Thank you, all of you distinguished honorable members of the National Assembly, for your avowed commitment to cooperate with the executive to accelerate the pace of our socio-economic development and enhance the welfare of the people. 2019 presentation and 2020?
Well, I think the difference was very, very clear, not just to the men and women in the room in the National Assembly today, but also to the viewers around the world and here at home. And I think that can be traced back to a few factors. One, you look at the fact that the composition of the leadership of the National Assembly, it was backed by a joint coalition of multiple political parties who came together to agree that nation building is a joint task and that it's a serious business. And now it's time for governance as opposed to having political focus. And I think what you saw during the last budget presentation was a demonstration of a politically focused National Assembly that was getting ready for an election season. I think that the focus has clearly changed, and it starts with the leadership of the National Assembly as it's currently assembled today under the leadership of Senate President Ahmad Lawan.
Okay, before I go to other guests, now the budget is tight on key assumptions and key capital spendings. And let's look at it holistically in terms of what we are having now and what will be seen from 2020, given the breakdown given by Mr. President.
Very good. You know, let me just start by saying I think the element that stands out that makes this budget a bit different from what we've seen in years past is the attachment to the budget of the 2019 finance bill. Within that bill are some very important pro-people components that really distinguish this appropriation bill. Let me be very specific in what I'm talking about. You would find that, you know, across talk radio around the country, there's been a bit of panic in the public domain around the idea of raising the percentage of value-added tax. You know, there were conversations about who is that going to affect, you know, what kind of impact will it have on our most vulnerable populations, segments of our population, etc., raising it from 5% to 7.5%. Now, I think clearly today, with that finance bill and with the explanation given by President Muhammadu Buhari, a lot of those concerns have been put to rest, and this is why I say so. First of all, we know that the Value Added Tax Act, the VAT Act, stipulated some certain exemptions from the VAT increase previously, which were pharmaceuticals, basic education items, and some other basic commodities. But there were a lot of items that were not on the exemption list, which means that, of course, on those items, the VAT increase would take effect. Now, with the finance bill that was, you know, explained today by Mr. President, it became very clear that the exemption list on the original VAT Act is now being expanded by Mr. President to include very specific items that are staples for the most vulnerable segments of our population. And more specifically, that includes both brown and white bread, eggs, all meat products, that's all fish, goat meat, chicken, you name it, all fruits, all vegetables, all flour and starch items, all root vegetables, including yams and potatoes, you name it, salts and herbs, and even water, table water and natural water, for example. All of these specific items have been added to the exemption list, which means that the majority of our population that really focus in on these items within market squares around the country are not going to be affected at all by the increase in VAT. And this is a very, very important point for our people to understand this evening. The second thing I would add to that is that the President made clear today that there's going to be a raise in the threshold of businesses that are going to be impacted or focused on in terms of compliance, in terms of the increase in VAT. And those businesses will not be the kinds of micro, small, and medium-scale businesses that were concerned that the VAT increase may impact them. He has now essentially exempted them by raising the threshold to an annual profit turnover of 25 million naira worth of profit on an annual basis. If you're below that threshold, then your business will not be affected by the increase in value-added tax from 5% to 7.5%. And that the focus on compliance will now be on businesses that make more than 25 million naira annually in profit. So that's why we say this is a pro-people budget. very carefully, the president has looked out for the interests of those who are most vulnerable in our society. I think if you look at the composition of the budget, though, you would now look at where are the funds being allocated? What are the priorities? You know, there have been a lot of criticisms over the past few years that, you know, people who have said, look, you're investing a lot in infrastructure, that's good, but where's the investment in healthcare? Where's the investment in education? They felt that we weren't prioritizing that. And so what Mr. President has done clearly in this budget is to say that is of utmost priority. Now, not only do you have the Ministry of Health with about 46 billion naira, which people will look at and say that's not enough. You have the Ministry of Education at about 48 billion naira. People will say that's not enough. I need to just say this last point. This last point, please.
Okay, go ahead.
Is that those budgets are not exclusive items. What we've also put in place for healthcare, for example, is the basic healthcare provision fund of 44 billion naira that will join with the health ministry's budget. And then in education, we've put in 111 billion under the Universal Basic Education Fund to add to the education budget, and that's not including the nearly 200 billion that we've already paid out to the universities through the TET Fund earlier on in this year. So there have been a lot of concerns, and I believe that with this budget, Mr. President has more than addressed the concerns, and I look forward to getting into some of the other sectors that Mr. President focused on in this budget.
We'll do a breakdown of the budget eventually, but let me go to Derek and his team. Let them put a line of thought on this. Now, one concern about the budget is the drive by the government to create jobs to the budget. What's your take on that? Yeah.
Okay. Clearly, listening to Mr. President and the presentation of the budget, one thing that clearly resonates with me, and of course from the Minister of Petroleum Resources, in the Office of the Minister for State Petroleum Resources, is that creation of jobs in multiple sectors. And the petroleum industry is one key sector that helps in job creation, which, of course, if you look at what we're doing in the Nigerian gas flare commercialization program, by the time we trigger a set of 60 to 70 projects as part of our gas flare reduction, we're going to create around 300,000 direct and indirect jobs in the Niger Delta and, of course, for Nigerians. And what this program will bring, again, in tune with the Mr. President's drive to incentivize private sector investment to implement the federal government's programs, policies, and, of course, strategies, is that the program will bring an inward 3.5 billion worth of investment into this country. So if government create that enabling environment for investors to come in, you will see that then this budget, of course, will say the green light.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I entirely agree with what Justice said. Only to add that the imperative of job creation is all the more pressing because we are facing a potential calamity if we don't take action now to address the needs of so many unemployed youth as our population begins to grow. Now, having said that, Justice alluded to the value addition potential in gas that's brought from harnessing gas flares and the economic multiplier effect that ensues from that. I think to be effective in job creation, there needs to be a synergy between the infrastructure development plans and our job creation initiatives in programs like the gas flare commercialization program, such that we actually match the enabling infrastructure to the capacity that we're developing, both in terms of human potential and in terms of the gas flare reduction and value addition value chains that we're going to create from that. So absolutely, it's extremely important. It's an imperative we must face now if we're to not become behind the eight ball, but there has to be a synergy and symphonic approach to doing it. From a development perspective, I think that's very important.
Okay, let me take on Dr. Semioma. You are coming from the sector that is always in the front runner, Niger Delta stakeholder.
Yes.
What's your perspective?
I think that in terms of just focusing on job creation, in the Niger Delta in particular, I would buttress the point Justice made about the potentials from the gas flare help program. It is important to mention that the current situation in the Niger Delta in terms of investments is rather poor. people are not very keen to come to the Delta for reputational reasons and things like that. And if and when the Nigerian gas flare commercialization program comes on board in the Niger Delta, I would go as far as saying it will be a game changer, because, having 60 to 70 flare-out projects in the Niger Delta, gas processing facilities across the region, it would be a lot of jobs. It would mean economically empowering people, and I think the likelihood of potentially even reducing things like conflict, crisis, piracy, militancy. I think it is very important to focus on job creation, because the youths are coming out, lots of graduates coming out from the universities, and there must be something for them to do.
Okay. Before I go back to the senior special assistant, we'll take a shot at Lagos, and my question to Lagos, if Lagos is on now, would be quickly to say that, let me start with the President, Nigeria Gas Association in Lagos, at the Lagos Network Center. Budget cycle has been an issue in Nigeria, and for the first time in many years, the President has taken off to restore the budget cycle of January to December. What do you make of this?
Yes, I think that it is very laudable. One of the key challenges that we have, especially in our sector, is the way that the projects are impacted by not having clarity as to how much of the budget will be expended in any particular year, and all the attendant delays that go with that. So we're very excited. The gas industry is one that is replete with loads of projects that needs to get off from the drawing board. Infrastructure is a huge challenge for us. We see it as an imperative for Nigeria to get things right as far as our industry is concerned, especially because as a nation, we have been talking about economic diversification for the past few years. And we're very clear that that cannot happen unless we get our power sector fixed. And for us, given that 80% of power is thermal, we see then that the gas-to-power sector is critical to Nigeria achieving her diversification objectives. So we think that this is a very good move in the right direction. It is then more important, beyond the presentation early, that we can also carry through on implementation in a structured manner and in a timely manner.
Okay. The next question before I come back to Abuja goes to Bala. Bala, the senior special assistants that talked about VAT, and I remember vividly Mr. President saying that the chunk of the VAT revenue will go through the states and the local government, and he talked about out of 100%, 80% of this will be going to the local government and states, to give them more life, more breath to function and deliver on the people's demands. What do you think this will be achieved?
Well, first of all, I'm probably among those who are at variance with the increase or the planned increase of VAT from 5% to 7.5, and I had my reasons. But one of the reasons is this: I mean, we should rather widen the net of those who have not really been paying VAT. If we broaden the net, I think I am more interested in the volume rather than increasing the value. And the reason is this: when you talk about aggregate mobility, when you're talking about GDP growth, you're talking about creating goods and services, and there are so many Nigerians, that are actually not in the tax net. So if we increase and we widen the tax net, I think especially the VAT, that will help a lot. And something tells me that many people don't really know how poor Nigerians are. To be honest, Nigerians are really poor. Nigerians are groaning under pain. And when we really start talking about this gas, we'll probably get to the point where we will clearly show why energy deficit has basically crippled so many Nigerians. And if we can get these Nigerians on board, if they can become active, if they can become productive, just because we will have sufficiency of energy, believe me, we will be able to scoop so much without necessarily increasing the VAT.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, in conclusion, for this first segment, Ajulu, wrapping up, general expectation, a balance expressed on fears, as much as Mr. President says 80% of the VAT goes to the people, the 30 of government and the states. So, in conclusion.
Okay, well, let's be clear. You know, VAT is 85% is going to the states and local governments. I think that's a welcome development for Nigerians when you consider that the projected increase from 5% to 7.5% is going to yield something in real monetary terms of about 1 trillion naira to 2 trillion naira, mostly for the states to provide, obviously, their constitutionally mandated basic health, basic education, which the federal government is now stepping in to even supplement that. But I would respectfully and humbly disagree with my friend Bala in this regard. We believe, this administration believes that you can walk and chew gum at the same time. That means that we believe that you can expand the tax net, which we have done verifiably, from 13 million taxpayers in 2015 to now over 20 million taxpayers in 2019. So that's an ongoing process, and we're doing it. What we're saying is what makes VAT peculiar and of particular interest is that we need to get more funds to the states and local governments. And the reason why is if you look at the guidelines that were put forward by the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit that have now put federal funds directly in the hands of local government officials as opposed to going through state coffers, and you look at the increasing responsibilities in terms of the increase in minimum wage that states now have, it's very clear that states need more resources, and the VAT offers us the opportunity to get those resources into their hands. So I fundamentally disagree with my friend on that note. And by the way, he mentioned those who are impoverished. I laid out very clearly why the financial bill of 2019 is going to protect those who are the most vulnerable in our society. Look, we're going to need to take a proper diagnosis of the budget. I don't think I can conclude it in 2 minutes because there's so many sectors, but I would say this. The increase in recurrent expenditure to tune of about 4.88 trillion in this appropriation bill is it's increased now by about 620 billion approximately over last year's recurrent in the last year's appropriation. The reason why is because not only are we accounting for the increase in the minimum wage to make sure that everybody's captured and taken care of, but now we've also increased the remuneration which our police officers have long demanded for. Many civil society groups have said we need to fund our security agencies more efficiently. We have now adjusted their remuneration, their allowances, not just the police, but also across the armed forces, and that is why recurrent has increased marginally to accommodate that. So I think if you look across the board, the investments that are being made are not just for human capital, but also to ensure that we make efficient expenditures on critical infrastructure. I wish I could get into power because the Siemens deal is separate.
For this segment.
So, of course, we have to end here.
Well, like Adamu Sambo said in his report, the Minister of Budget, Finance and Budget Planning will give a breakdown to the budget, and NTA through all its platform will do a breakdown of the budget tied to key assumptions, the 2020 federal budget itself, and key capital spendings allocations. That will do in subsequent program. Well, that's that on this segment of Tuesday Live Tonight, which was on the President's 2020 budget presentation to the joint session of the National Assembly. And at this point, I have to sign off. The Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs, Ajuri Ngalale, who will be stepping out when we return from break. And next segment, when we come back, it will be focused on harnessing Nigeria's gas for wealth creation in Nigeria. The program, once again, is Tuesday Live. Stay with us.
Nigerians, our fearless officers and men of the Nigerian military are winning the war against Boko Haram. Today, all occupied territories have been recovered and Boko Haram has been degraded. Our affected brothers and sisters are getting their lives back. However, they are now after you and me. In our mosques, churches, schools, motor parks, markets, entertainment centers, and public gatherings. Be vigilant. Be secure. security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me. Nigeria, unite against terrorism.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
The struggle for independence had been a long and tough one. Our founding fathers and compatriots sacrificed their comfort and even shed their blood. We cannot at this point in history afford to spirit away their sacrifices for immediate but temporary gains of today. Let us emphasize what unites and not what divides us. Working for the unity of purpose with a stronger vision for a better tomorrow. NTA, growing with the nation.
Nigeria, the only country we can train with remarkable potentials to excel. Let us believe in ourselves and change our attitude for the sake of our country and generations unborn. Let us revive our cultural values, which are our essence as a nation. Let us renew the spirit of patriotism and hope in our dear country. Do not take or give bribe. Be punctual always. No more African time. We can't expect to be global citizens and operate on African time. Join the queue. Insist that people are attended to on a first-come basis, no matter who they are or where they come from.
Nigeria, good people, great nation.
Make you report any crooked person, object or wakajube movement to police and security agents.
The security of our nation now work for all of us, plus including me and you.
Nigeria, make we unite against terrorism. Now, Federal Minister of Information and Culture bring on this message.
Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
For staying tuned, and on the second leg of Tuesday Live tonight, take a look at harnessing Nigeria's gas for wealth creation. Nigeria, with the largest gas reserves in Africa, is ranked 9th as countries with natural gas in the world, yet among highest gas flare countries globally. Going by records, Nigeria has around 202 trillion cubic feet of proven gas reserves, and only about 25% of reserves are being produced and underdeveloped. The federal government has made it a priority to unlock and harness the potential of its gas resources to increase domestic and industrial power supply, raise living standards, and support sustainable economic growth and diversification in the country across board. More important, the federal government's commitment to a national flare-out target by next year, 2020. The development that has given rise to a Nigerian gas flare commercialization program that will, among other things, add value to the gas resources for wealth creation. How far with the project, and how well are Nigerians keen into it? Answers and more after this background report by Nida Samson.
Is one of the most challenging energy and environmental problems facing the world today. The world is facing global warming as one of its main issues. This problem is further attributed to rise in CO2, CH4, and other greenhouse gases emissions into the atmosphere. The policy position of the federal government of Nigeria is that gas flaring is unacceptable. Therefore, the federal government initiated a number of actions to reaffirm its commitment to ending the practice of gas flaring in oil fields. To further reiterate the nation's commitment, the federal government has ratified the Paris Climate Change Agreement and is a signatory to the Global Gas Flaring Partnership Principles for Global Flare-Out by 2030, with Nigeria committing to a national flare-out target by the year 2020, barely months away. In recognition that flared gas could be harnessed to stimulate economic growth, drive investment, and provide jobs in oil-producing communities, and indeed for Nigerians through the utilization of widely available innovative technologies, the Federal Executive Council approved the Nigerian Gas Flare Commercialization Program. This program was launched by the then Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, December 13, 2016. The NGFCP is designed as a strategy to implement the policy objectives of the federal government for the elimination of gas flares with potentially enormous multiplier and developmental outcome for Nigeria. The objective of the NGFCP is to eliminate gas flaring through technically and commercially sustainable gas utilization projects developed by competent third-party investors who will be invited to participate in a competitive and transparent bid process. The commercialization approach has been considered from legal, technical, economic, commercial, and developmental standpoints. Experts say it is a unique and historic opportunity to attract major investment in economically viable gas flare capture projects while permanently addressing a 60-year-old environmental problem in Nigeria, meaning the NGFCP will offer the flared gas for sale by the federal government of Nigeria through a transparent and competitive bidding process. The question is, how far has the Nigerian gas flare commercialization program gone with the federal government commercializations? Is Nigeria going to make the 2020 gas flare out target? These and others are some of the questions seeking answers from our panel on Tuesday Live.
The team here has capacity and capability to deliver on the answers. Well, in the course of the program, laced with phone calls and tweets, we shall take other reports from Kaduna, Lagos, and Port Harcourt. My team of guests are still intact, except the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs was left. I still have tonight with me Justice Derefaka, Charles Majomi, Enemo Samema, Audrey, Joe Ezegbo, and Bala Zaka from the Lagos Network Center to sustain discussion tonight. Quickly, let me take off with justice. From inception, a lot of persons felt it was a mistake at conception. Was it deliberate? Was it an omission? Was it ignorance regarding the fact that the issue of non-gas flaring was not captured?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. So let me start by answering it this way. Previously, previous government allowed the producers to eliminate gas flaring in their oil and gas operations and activities. And the goalposts keep shifting from one year to the other, including increasing gas flare penalty that never saw the day of light. Now, government in its wisdom, and again, you recall that Mr. President just came back from New York some days back at the 74th session of the United Nations General Assembly, where he vehemently clearly stated that he's with world leaders in terms of climate change issue. Now, the whole world is looking at every issue around global warming and climate change, and you cannot gloss over that. And gas flaring is a key contributor in that space. So, Mr. President, when he attended the COP21 in 2017, made a commitment as part of our national determined contribution to say he will be part of those that will reduce gas flaring, and he's going to include that as part of the national determined contributions. Now, coming back to your question, oil companies were asked to do that, and the goalposts keep shifting. Now, irrespective of the fact that we still flare gas, and over the years, we've had some form of decline. So it's not all gloom and doom, but the volume of gas flaring is still worrisome. Now, why did I say this? Way back in 2001, we were flaring over around 50% of the gas that we generate in this country. Now, as at this year, July 2019, it's around 11%. So you can see that there's around 70% decline rates of gas flaring, and thanks to the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation and their joint venture partners, and of course the marginal feed operators. But the volume of gas will flare is still worrisome. So I'll put that into context. In last year, 2018, we flared around 300 billion cubic feet of gas. In this country, our power utilization in terms of gas is around 800 million standard cubic feet of gas. And yet, as a country, on a daily basis, we flare over 800 million standard cubic feet of gas, which means we could double our power generation, and which means putting more energy into the country to spark up industry and business activities. Our domestic industrial utilization is around 450 million standard cubic feet of gas. And yet we flare this amount of volume that we could triple our domestic gas utilization. So Mr. President said enough is enough, that this time around he's going to exercise his powers in pursuant to the Petroleum Act Section 9 and 11, and in particular paragraph 35B of the first schedule, which states the federal government will take these flares from producers that comes with the crude oil without payments of any royalty, and they will look for competent third parties that have the financial war chest with proven technology in commercial applications, not no pay kind of technology, to harness these flare gas and go to the acreages of the producers and take this flare gas with this technology that they're going to deploy. And we know, yes, overall, globally, pipeline is the most preferred method of transferring gas. But there are scalable, skid-mounted, plug-and-play, kind of including compressed natural gas or virtual pipeline that you can move this gas to remote locations that this gas don't get to. And that's what the NGSCP is out to actualize. So on a daily basis for the past 60 years, we've been wasting this gas. It's been causing environmental issues, health issues, and there's a social cost to it. So that has been a major concern for every human being. And remember, air pollution is detrimental to human health. The United Nations has said over 600,000 people die annually in Africa as a result of air pollution. And gas flaring is one of the key drivers. Okay. Now, I want to let you know that Nigeria alone, we contribute over around 40% of the gas flare in Africa.
Okay.
Are we the only country in this world, in the continent? So that's a big problem. Okay. So the federal government has taken this step to say enough is enough. And so we came up with Mr. President now came up with a new regulation, which is called the Flare Gas Prevention of Waste and Pollution Regulations 2018, to underpin the implementation of the Nigerian gas flare commercialization program.
Mind-blowing, breathtaking, and let me ask you, given the projection he has given, the explanation he has given, humongous there, if I ask you then and now in terms of what would have gotten into the till of government?
Wow. Well, therein lies the understanding of the kind of wastage that we've undertaken in this country by engaging in this practice. Before I get to that, let me just highlight one thing. The reason for the wastage was primarily owed to the fact that most of the producers of flared gas are crude oil producers. And it's what we call associated gas. It's a byproduct of crude oil production. Now, this associated gas is either re-injected into the ground to help pressurize crude oil, or it is flared. And that is the wastage of it. These people are not in the business of commercializing the gas. Had we commercialized gas till now, we certainly would not have the extent of the power issues that we have today. When we talk about, for example, LPG, liquefied petroleum gas, which is what we use as cooking gas primarily, do you know that we are the lowest per capita users of liquefied petroleum gas in West Africa, even though we're the second largest producers of LPG and potentially the largest producers of LPG on the continent? What is the consequence of this? Not only in terms of financial costs, but in terms of human lives. Because we're not producing enough LPG to sustain cooking in this country, we are engaging in massive deforestation. Okay, we're also using, which is basically terrible, which is another harm to the environment. We're also using kerosene, okay, which is increasing female mortality rates because they are inhaling these fumes. So the cost is humongous in terms of what it's done to really debilitate our industrial capacity. It is humongous in terms of the ecological disaster that it's caused us, both in terms of deforestation and in terms of ecological degradation. It's also humongous in terms of human cost, in terms of the mortality rate it's cost. So I would calculate the cost as enormous, not only financially, but in terms of the other issues as well.
Okay. to Samioma.
Yes, please.
Years back, I had a friend. All his life, he lived in Port Harcourt.
Yeah.
And he was moved to a city in the Niger Delta, Calabar.
Yeah.
And he said while in Port Harcourt, he had breathing problems.
Yes.
But moving on to Calabar, that ceased automatically. Mm-hmm. Now, today, if you're in Port Harcourt, I don't know whether it happens during the rainy season, you find soot everywhere. Yeah. So if this project succeeds environmentally, what's your projection?
It would mean, firstly, a cleaner environment in the Niger Delta. It is important to understand that gas flaring has been going on for over 60 years.
Over 60 years?
Yes, from the onset when oil production started. And that means the people and the environment, the Niger Delta environment, have been suffering from the negative consequences of gas flaring within this period. When we say negative consequences, there are quite credible reports that when gas is flared, there are toxins that are embedded in this flared gas. And eventually these toxins, some of which are like sulfur, benzene, lead, and others, they have quite negative impact on human health. That means it could cause respiratory diseases, cancer, and others.
Like the example I gave you?
Exactly. I don't know how true these figures are, but it is claimed that life expectancy in the Niger Delta is lower than other parts of Nigeria.
So if this project succeeds?
If this project succeeds, that means people in the Niger Delta will probably live longer, will have a healthier environment. It will have a direct impact on food production. And for me, the most important bit is right now, the consequences of oil production has been quite negative. Apart from the revenues that come to the federal coffers and are distributed, it's been really negative for the Niger Delta in terms of gas flaring that I've just spoken about, but equally in terms of the oil spills. If this project succeeds, I foresee a future in the Niger Delta that would be not only cleaner in terms of the environment, but when this gas flares are harnessed and processed, and you get things like LPG, LNG, and above all, power. That is what earlier on I said it could be a game changer.
Okay.
Niger Delta would be transformed economically because when, especially power, when you have power in Nigeria, 24 hours power, that could contribute to rapid economic development, industrialization in the country. And he also mentioned the fact that people are still cutting down trees, deforestation. If there's LPG, cleaner, it's much cleaner energy source than coal or kerosene. So I think the future looks brighter for the Niger Delta if this project takes off, or rather when it takes off. We, especially people from the civil society sector, we are excited because for long we've been advocating and campaigning against gas flaring and oil spills and the environmental degradation in the Niger Delta. So this is something that we welcome, is something we can't wait to see happen. And you can see that even from the way I'm talking, I'm pretty excited about the prospects of stopping gas flaring in the Niger Delta.
Okay, let's go to Lagos. And if Mrs. Joe Ezigbo and Bala can hear me clearly, can we see Lagos, please? Okay, if they can hear me clearly, I told this question to you, Mrs. Ezigbo. Your question will be on the econometrics of this whole structure. And Bala, you take the questions on the socials. Socials as in, what will it look like in terms of if it works, alternative livelihood options. But let me start with the president of Nigerian Gas Association. The econometrics of all this, positives.
The positives, let's look at this. From the studies that have been done, it's estimated that at least about $3.5 billion of investments will be if this program succeeds. Now, if you think about the fact that there is a proven correlation between the amount of gas that you use on the domestic, in-country domestic utilization of gas and national economic development, where it is said that every $1 invested in gas translates to at least another $3 increase in GDP. You can imagine what those numbers look like. Now, when we're talking about the kinds of projects that can come out of the National Gas Flare Commercialization Project, we're looking at not just industries that are going to use gas for power, we're looking at industries that will use gas as fuel for various applications, but more importantly, looking at industries that will use gas as feedstock. And those kind of industries matter to us because they're able to take on a lot of our unemployed youth, so we create a lot of employment opportunities, we create a lot of social benefits. And for a country currently, I think our employment statistics are currently in the region of about 23.1% unemployment, rising from about 13.9% just a few years ago. It's important to us that we have not just the financial benefits, but also looking at the social impact so that we avoid what could otherwise look like an impending social implosion. So we feel that between the various types of projects that can come on in the infrastructure space, the development of clusters of industrial hubs around some of those facilities, then we see that there's an even greater multiplier effect that can come to the government. Now, I just want to touch quickly on the power conversation. Justice had alluded to the fact that we're flaring about the same amount of gas that we are using in the power space. Now, when you consider the fact that currently our generation is at about 5 megawatts at best, and the kind of gas we're flaring is able to generate that. For a country as big as Nigeria with over 200 people, where the United Nations recommendation is that you should have at least 1 gigawatt of power for every 1 million people, means really when we're talking about industrialization, we should be operating with at least 200 gigawatts. And we're nowhere near that. We're still talking about an aspiration to get to 7,000 by the year 2020. So this project stands to bring to the fore the ramping up of the power generation in country, which would then allow several other industries, even along the SME corridor, to be able to also increase their own pace of contribution to the economy. So it is, I think, something that we have to work together in a concerted manner to make sure that it succeeds. It has multiple financial benefits, multiple environmental benefits, multiple social benefits that this country cannot afford to ignore any longer.
Okay, Bala, you heard what Madam said, multiple economic benefits, multiple environmental benefits, multiple social benefits. Now, a lot of social activities are happening now. If this succeeds, I imagine the alternative livelihood options. What's your take?
It will be great for Nigeria. First of all, if you keep renewable energy aside and you keep off energy that we get from hydro, and you just want to concentrate on what we call fossil fuel or energy from fossil fuel, natural gas is the cleanest. Natural gas is the cleanest. And you're talking about raw material here. Everywhere you go, when you talk about production, and when you're talking about accounting, and you're talking about cost of sale, the most expensive and the most difficult thing to always get in place is called the raw material. And in our own case in Nigeria, it gets me surprised that we have the raw material. All we need is to deploy it as a feedstock and use it, and that's where we have the problems. And when you talk about energy gaps and deficiencies, if you closely look at strategic domestic sectors, strategic industrial sectors, and strategic commercial sectors, they can only work if you drive them using energy. can remember when we even unbundled NEPA, we predicated the unbundling of NEPA on the availability of gas to drive the gas turbines. Come to look at it, if we use the gas that we have, we drive the turbines and we have electricity, between you and I, there will be glut at the filling stations. The only reason why you go to the filling stations, we're talking about subsidies today, where you go to the filling stations and see generators competing with vehicles for diesel and petrol, is because we do not have electricity. Then when you come to look at it again, in terms of other benefits, from natural gas, you're going to get ammonia. From ammonia, you are going to get fertilizer. So only on that, if you just decide that we are going to deploy the gas that we are having, to make sure we get enough ammonia, and we go into fertilizer production, do you know what will happen to food security in Nigeria? We can also sell some of these fertilizers to other parts of the world or other parts of Africa. So when you look at it, we are just talking about raw material that is just lying waste, or we just allow to continue to waste. And remember, we are also a member of this gas cartel that we call Gas Exporting Countries Forum, with headquarters in Doha, Qatar. Everything you hear about the riches and affluence of Qatar is predicated on the availability of this same gas that looks like a wasted raw material. If we belong to the same cartel, can't we even share and cross-fertilize knowledge? So when you look at it from that angle, we're just talking about raw material that we are allowing to waste. And all that I can say is this new program is a welcome idea. It's long overdue, and we need it.
Thank you so much. Now, back to justice. Nigerians hearing us talk about this will be imagine, has it taken off? If it takes off, how is it going to be? So, question now is there going to be a pilot? If the pilot takes off, how long are you going to experiment it? Is it going to take off holistically? And if it takes off holistically, what are the short-term plans, long-term plans?
Okay.
Has it taken off already?
It has taken off. The train has left the station, actually. So we're heading towards we're in implementation phase right now. And it will interest you to know that a month ago, we got a marching order from the presidency to avoid any slippage regarding the Nigerian gas flare commercialization. That's to tell you how serious Mr. President is concerned with this program. Now, interestingly, the Honorable Minister of State Petroleum Resources, Excellency Chief Tim Silva, when he unveiled his 10-point priority areas, he captured that he must complete the Nigerian gas flare commercialization program, amongst others. So that gives a boost to this program. So when this program was launched in December 2016, it started to be the design of the transactional and commercial structure, and of course involving from the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, the Department of Petroleum Resources, and the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation. At some point, we have to recuse NNPC because of their upstream arm. And then as the implementation phase now, we brought them in because their Nigerian gas marketing company will be administering the gases agreement, and the Renewable Energy Department of NNPC will collectivize our emission credit and of course take it to the market. That will generate around $500 million annually.
Okay.
Now, so last year, after the design of the transitional structure and of course the bidding process, we went public and asked for expression of interest, and over 800 interested parties registered on the NGSCP portal. Now, after that, we now issued a request for qualification package, which is the first phase for us to see, to know those that are serious-minded, that have the registered company, and of course, they have the technology and the finance to run this project. And over 240 submitted their qualifying statement, what we call a statement of qualification. Now, the Honorable Minister of State inaugurated a proposal evaluation committee, what we call PEC. This PEC is to evaluate these submissions and, of course, make recommendations to the Interministerial Steering Committee of the NGFCP. Apart from that, looking at the federal government's initiative in terms of transparency, the Honourable Minister also inaugurated an independent observer group coming from the Oil Producers Trade Session, the NATI, and of course the USAID, and of course our development foster and the Global Gas for Reserve Initiative of the World Bank. And at the end of the day, 205 applicants moved to the next stage to become what we call qualified applicants, and about 32 other companies did not meet up the pass mark. So we're moving to the next phase where we'll issue the request for proposals, where the different qualified applicants will come up with a proposal on how they will utilize these flare gas, the technology they will deploy, and of course the end product, what we call the flare gas to market product, they will take to the market. So a lot of things have gone on, and at the moment now, there is still opportunity for some investors and of course financiers and technology providers to key in, and that will be during where we have the Nigerian Gas Flare Bidders Conference. Now that Bidders Conference is where we have a networking session where there's going to be a B2B conversation, and of course where some of the qualified applicants will be looking at financial loans, soft loans, and of course in case they don't have a final decision on the technology they want to deploy, because we are looking to end-to-end solution to gas flaring. We don't want a situation where we're taking these gas flares from producers and then we're giving to these third party and you equally flare. So it has defeated the purpose, because we have 5 cardinal grounding philosophy that guides the Nigerian gas flare commercialization. Top amongst is number 1, gas flare must be reduced. Number 2, it must benefit the Niger Delta community. Number 3, it must positively impact the Nigerian economy. Number 4, it is going to be market driven. And then number 5, it will be attractive to investors and lenders. And then number 6, which is half a dozen now, it will not disrupt oil and gas operations. Remember, we're still relying on crude oil, for example, to maintain the economy. So looking at all of these issues, we are seeing a situation where all the negatives, will reverse all the negatives and convert them to positives. Now, like your reporter did mention, we are number 7 in the League of Gas Flare Nations globally. Now, like a typical football league, we don't want to be in that league. We want relegation in that League of Gas Flare Nations. So we want to reverse all the negatives. For instance, the gas that we flare on an annual basis, we lose over $1 billion. The NGFCP is going to reverse this, so there's going to be GDP impact of $1 billion to the nation coffers.
Okay. In doing justice to this topic tonight, which is harnessing Nigeria's gas for wealth, we told you we have a couple of reports, and the very first put together by Abdullahi Mohammed is coming from Kaduna.
When the crude oil undergoes refining, keen interest is often given to the extraction of many of its byproducts, with the exception of gas. Premium motor spirit, one of the most sought-after substances, refined at the expense of millions of metric tons of gas. From 1996 to date, Nigeria has been able to slow down its gas flaring levels from 75% to about 11%. Even at this rate, Ali Mohammed Dabo, a professor of oil refining and chemical engineering, says the country still releases a daily emission equivalent to that emitted by 11 million cars. The Russian-trained oil refining expert says Nigeria requires an infrastructural investment to the tune of about $3.5 billion to meet the 2% gas flaring levels accepted by the World Bank.
Because we are unable to develop the technology locally, that is why it is very expensive. So the take home is we should try to solve Nigerian problem Nigerian way.
Professor Ali Mohammed Dabo said Nigerian researchers are already developing local technology to transform the gas being flared to provide energy and other critical household uses, as well as limit the levels of emission.
We have developed a unit that utilizes it. Of course, what we have developed is not to stop flaring. We are burning it, but instead of expelling the harmful emissions to the environment, we are trapping them. So you are expelling clean air now.
Nigeria has set itself a target that by the year 2020, it will meet its aspirations of turning gas flaring to gas treasure. And researchers like Professor Ali Muhammad Dabo are expected to play critical roles. In Kaduna, Abdullahi Muhammad, NTA News.
Thank you, Abdullahi. And from Kaduna, we move to Lagos, where Dotun Ogunyemi has a package.
Considered as an emergency the world over, emission of greenhouse gases is a major contributor to climate change. President Muhammadu Buhari, a few weeks ago, at the United Nations Climate Summit 2019, announced his administration's plan to realize 30% energy efficiency and reduce about 179 million tons of carbon dioxide per annum by the year 2030. However, while gas flaring persists with significant reduction by about 2 billion cubic meters from 2012 to 2015, according to the World Bank, Nigeria is still the 7th largest gas flarer in the world. This is a matter of concern for environmentalists like Desmond Majekodumi.
The main source of our electricity generation comes from natural gas. And nobody can say we're producing enough electricity. So if we can channel gas that's being flared to generating electricity, even if it's just in that local catchment area.
Industry players also see potential in Nigeria's gas reserve of over 2 billion cubic feet.
It's more economical for profit, so there's no reason why gas shouldn't be. In most part of Europe and America, people hardly use crude oil. Gas powers the industries. With right policies, right guidelines, right negotiation, it will definitely be the future energy we're expecting.
The Flare Gas Prevention, Waste and Pollution Regulation 2018, approved by President Buhari, is part of Nigeria gas flare commercialization program, which aims at reducing and also create social and economic benefit from gas flare capture of an abundant resource of about 8.2 million cubic feet per day. In Lagos, Dotun Ogunyemi, NTA News.
Thank you, Dr. Ogunyemi. And staying on Lagos, that report came from Lagos, and I want to stay on Lagos. And my first shot after the report goes to Mrs. Joe Ezigbo. You are the president of the Nigerian Gas Association, and give and take. What you'll be asking now is, you are more or less an intermediary between this project and Nigerians, this project and your affiliates outside the country. And we'll ask, are you ready to engage? Are you ready to interface? Will you be overwhelmed?
Certainly, we are actually already doing that, and Justice is my friend across the table there, he knows. Now, as the Nigerian Gas Association, one of our core roles is that of advocacy. We are always working for what is in the best interest of the gas industry and then also for Nigeria and Nigerians. Now, for this project, like I said, we very much support it. One of the first things that we have done is immediately the regulations came out, we shared it with our members, we went into consultations with our members, because it is important to us that there is a collaborative approach to this. One of the things that sometimes impedes the progress of policy initiatives is resistance, either on the part of the government or on the part of the industry, and we come in to mediate in that regard. So we've had our members review, send in their concerns. We've had some back and forth. For instance, I'll give you a very simple example. There is, in the penalty scheme, there is zero tolerance for flaring, be it routine or non-routine flaring. And members are concerned, for instance, what about safety flares? I mean, safety flares are an imperative. But we also understand that while this is, it would seem that you're being penalized for that, it's just to make sure that it doesn't become the guise under which flaring continues. and so many other issues. So there are concerns about who the permit holders are going to be. You always want to be careful after spending billions of dollars on your installations, who you allow into your battery limits, what is their own technical competence, what kind of safety standards. But in the conversations, we see that even the policy is taking cognizance of that, and there's going to be handshakes. Now, in the process of these consultations, what we have found that is happening also is that because our members who are on the upstream side, they are interested also in this project. They know they can't operate as producers, but they're then forming partnerships with other Nigerian companies that will operate in the flare commercialization program as permit holders. Now, this is doing many things. One, it is also building further local capacity. So it's deepening our technical skills across board, and it's creating a forward trajectory for the project. So there's not that much resistance. Now, we also feel that one of the core roles that we have is to sensitize the financial world, the investment world, to say that there are some companies that are members of the NGA. We have screened them, we know their companies of integrity and good repute, and we create those kind of handshake meetings. So we represent Nigerian gas companies, not just in Nigeria, but also externally. The NGA is a chartered member of the International Gas Union. And so what we do also is to, in our networking engagements at the different IGU events, we profile some of our member companies just to create those kind of handshake meetings. So certainly there are issues that some of our members have with the way the program is framed, but it's not a resistance to truncate the program. It's more to understand how it is better operationalized. And I know that Justice and his team have been quite open in having those conversations to see how much better it can be structured. We don't want it to fail. They don't want it to fail. So certainly it's a win-win partnership. Whatever we as NGA will do to get our members on board, we're certainly working in that regard. That much I can assure you.
Go to Bala. Bala, in diplomacy, you hear lingos like win-lose, win-win. Just like Mr. Jugba said, he says a win-win. But Nigeria gas flare commercialization program, it has taken off, like Justice has said. Do you have fears? Do you have concerns? What safeguards should be in place? We've got quite a beautiful project. It looks so juicy, so beautiful. Do you have concerns? What safeguards should be put in place?
The only thing I can say is I want to advise Nigerian leaders to stop confirming the negative impression that the citizens are nurturing and harboring about them. As simple as that. That's all I can say. And let me explain it. The Nigerian citizens generally feel that our Nigerian leaders cannot pass the petroleum industry bill into law. And before you know what's happening, new leaders will come. Till the time they will leave, petroleum industry bills will not be passed into law. The citizens generally feel that Nigerian leaders cannot fix our refineries. And before you know what's happening, new leaders will come. Till the time they will exit their political life, they can't fix our refineries. Nigerian citizens generally feel that our leaders cannot give us good roads. Before you know, we will have a new political dispensation with leaders that will look agile, aggressive, and before you know, they will exit the political stage without giving us good roads. If you go to health, if you go to education, it's the same thing. So going back to your point, when you ask me what are my fears, what I actually want to do is to advise that for once, let Nigerian leaders prove their citizens wrong by making sure this program works. And all they need to do is to make sure the right policies are in place and they follow these policies to the end. And this is the way I want to define policy in this context. Policies are statements that are supposed to define the national philosophy of a country and must be seen to be reflected in the political thinking of its leaders. So, as we are talking now, What are we going to have as policies for the Nigerian gas flare commercialization program? Once those policies are there, then we will have them ingrained as a national philosophy, but they must be reflected in the political thinking of our leaders. Because I've explained to you already, Nigerian leaders are always helping their citizens to confine the negative impressions that the citizens are having about them.
Very much. Now, you react to a beautiful. We are back in Abuja. You heard what Bala said.
Let me. There are a couple of things I would like to add to what Mr. Bala said, and I, by the way, agree with him totally. I think.
You disagree?
I agree.
Okay.
I agree. There are a couple of issues, and I think your question was what could go wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, that was the initial
fears and
thing.
concerns.
Fears and concerns.
As beautiful as the project looks.
Indeed.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, and very often, I think while we're captivated by the romance of the promise that this thing has, we really need to sort of step down to some of the issues that could actually impede its full manifestation. In my view, I think one of the key elements that we always overlook in this country when we do energy projects is the impact that these energy projects have on host communities. The issue of host community conflict has raised its head time and time again in the past. I was actively involved in the Ogidiben Industrial Park project, which was a very, very ambitious gas-based industrial project located in the Escravos region, opposite from Chevron, where we had all the aspirations in the world to make Nigeria into a petrochemical hub that would effectively transform the economy. We were having much of the same conversations that we're having now. Now, it was a different program, not as well thought out, but I would say that in addition to a lot of the infrastructure challenges, the feedstock challenge, a lot of the other items that we could discuss, one of the key elements that actually undermined it was the host community. Now, when you go into a host community where there is a gas flare, you're dealing with a lot of legacy grievances that are legitimate. These people have had a flare burning in their community for several decades at times. Sometimes they call it shell fire. They even become sort of like accustomed to it. They start heating their gari and all sorts of things. It becomes a kind of dysfunctional element in their society. Okay, you're coming in and you're making investments. There must be a well thought out host community engagement strategy that understands legacy grievances, identifies the true leadership in the community, identifies elements of the community that could actually bring about conflict, okay, through what we term sometimes as conflict entrepreneurialism. Okay, there are those in our society who live on the fringes that would stand to benefit from driving conflicts that linked to legacy grievances. And that effectively spoils projects. Okay. A banker cannot model the risk element, cannot model the uncertainty of host community crises, but can model risk. We can model risk, but we can't model uncertainty. Yeah. And that is an issue. The second point that Let me
hold it before you take the second point. We have our first caller tonight.
Okay.
And our first caller tonight is calling in from Owerri, Imo State. He's Jude. Hello, Jude. Welcome to Tuesday Live. Hello, Jude. Well, it looks Jude is not there. So your second point?
Yeah, my second point really it concerns governance in the sector itself. I think to have a sustainable gas strategy, of which the gas flare commercialization is one, we really need to develop a separate identity for gas, separate from oil. Constantly, we are forcing gas is kind of like the neglected child that has come into his own, that's forced to wear the suits and the clothes of his older brother oil that he's outgrowing. Okay. We are in fact a gas nation.
I hear Jude is ready. Let's just take
Okay,
it. He's
go
been waiting. Hello, Jude. You're on to Tuesday Live tonight. Hello, Jude. Well, our first caller tonight is having it difficult to pull through. Well, maybe I'll sustain with you, Charles, when we come back from this break. The focus tonight again on Tuesday Live is harnessing natural gas for wealth creation just after this time out.
Nigerians, our fearless officers and men of the Nigerian military are winning the war against Boko Haram. Today, all occupied territories have been recovered and Boko Haram has been degraded. Our affected brothers and sisters are getting their lives back. However, they are now after you and me. In our mosques, churches, schools, motor parks, markets, entertainment centers, and public gatherings. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me. Nigeria unite against terrorism.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
The struggle for independence had been a long and tough one. Our founding fathers and compatriots sacrificed their comfort and even shed their blood. We cannot at this point in history afford to spirit away their sacrifices for immediate but temporary gains of today. Let us emphasize what unites and not what divides us. Working for the unity of purpose with a stronger vision for a better tomorrow. NTA, growing with the nation.
Nigeria, the only country we can train with remarkable potentials to excel. Let us believe in ourselves and change our attitude for the sake of our country and generations unborn. Let us revive our cultural values, which are our essence as a nation. Let us renew the spirit of patriotism and hope in our dear country. Do not take or give bribe. Be punctual always. No more African time. We can't expect to be global citizens and operate on African time. Join the queue. Insist that people are attended to on a first-come basis, no matter who they are or where they come from.
Nigeria, good people, great nation.
Make you report any crooked person, object or wakajube movement to police and security agent demo.
The security of our nation now work for all of us, plus including me and you.
Nigeria, make we unite against terrorism. Now, Federal Ministry of Information and Culture bring on this message.
8 Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Staying on to the program, and we said calls after they're coming in, but we couldn't really get the first caller tonight. And if you're on Twitter handle, it is at Tuesday Live NTA. Well, we're back. Charles was about concluding on governance before going to Samyama. So, can you conclude?
I was just saying that it's my view, and I think it's the view of everybody here in this panel, that gas is coming into...
Does that include Lagos?
It includes Lagos, it includes Abuja, and I'm sure many other cities in this country. The reality of the fact is that gas is finally coming into its own. And I think this type of program is a reflection of that reality currently in Nigeria. You know, we're constantly regarding ourselves as an oil nation. I think the reality is we are a gas nation with a little bit of oil. And as such, I think we have to start taking governance of gas as a standalone resource very seriously. We have to decouple it from oil. And I think that's a very, very important thing for us to do now on the back of such an important project as this.
Okay. Now, before I go to Samiama, we have yet one more report on this whole conversation, and that report is coming in from Port Harcourt, put together by Ijoma Ugwoke.
Over the years, gas flaring has been a challenge in the development of oil and gas sector. Investigations reveal that there are about 300 gas flaring sites in the Niger Delta region, which result in colossal waste of resources. To minimize gas flaring with its side effects, experts say there is need for a more targeted focus towards adequate planning and assessment to ascertain the volume of gas in every well for proper channeling and utilization.
If we have a very robust plan on the development and optimization of that particular well in question, then we prepare for the utilization and the processing of the gas. And at the end of the day, we take them through the normal processes, and then we can do exportation.
The gas infrastructure blueprint, which is supposed to lead to the development of pipelines that will cut across different states. If these pipelines are constructed and in operation, whichever state that the pipeline passes can spring up a lot of entrepreneurs that can provide hundreds of tons of jobs for Nigerians. That is what we're talking about.
Others advocate the application of advanced technologies in harnessing gas while appealing to government to provide enabling environment for more investors in oil and gas exploration.
And I think government should open up the system for people to play and bring down the cost of investment. If we have a commercial environment, people come and invest in the economy.
The success story of the Nigerian Liquefied Natural Gas Company is one in many pointers to the potential that lie in the natural resource.
The report from Port Harcourt takes us to Samioma. Now, Mr. Ezigbo, who is the president of the Nigerian Gas Association, said they are ready to engage, they are prepared, all that, and talked about the people and was raised concerns about host communities.
Yes.
And you are of the Niger Delta Stakeholders and Coordinator Center for Peace Development and Child Welfare.
Yeah.
In these connections,
I think it is important to mention that the promoters, all those who have expectations about getting approval for, let's say, one of the flare sites and going down to the Niger Delta to execute these projects, to understand that things are not the way they used to be. There's something I would call stakeholder sophistication in the Niger Delta. People are much more aware, even those in the local communities in the Niger Delta. A lot of persons can go to Google today, push a few buttons, and find out a lot of information. So please, people should not take the host communities in the Niger Delta for granted. Have a strategy on how to engage, ensure that there are dividends from your operations to the host communities. Just don't go there, dig one or two boreholes, and think that you can just cut away whatever profits you're going to make out of there. And
please just hang on a second. I hear Jude, our first caller from Owerri, has called back. Let's see if he's true now. Hello, Jude. Hello, Jude. You're on to Tuesday Live tonight. It looks tonight we're having issues with the... Can you conclude, please?
Okay. I think that...
yes. Good evening now, guys in the studio.
Good evening,
My name is Chief Jude Obaja. I come from Nigerian, Imo State.
Okay, go ahead.
I commend Mr. President for the painstaking effort in proposing... Hello?
Go ahead, please.
I commend Mr. President for the painstaking effort in proposing and presenting the 2020 all-encompassing budget, which portends very great hope for all all Nigerians and national development, and encourage this present National Assembly to pass them into law, for Mr. President to sign it into law too. The remarkable thing about the budget is that it is presented early enough to a National Assembly that is not confrontational with the executive, and all these are indicative of the fact that we must actually get to the promised land of full implementation and realization of the goal of the budget. As early to bed, they say, guarantees early to rise. Also, who fails to plan early enough has already planned to fail early enough. Let me equally commend all those that actually made imputes in the proposition and the presentation of this budget, quite unlike those of them that did the same in the past. Then the oil benchmark upon which the budget was predicated is most realistic, and the fact that the budget is not totally dependent on oil, but on other non-oil sectors, is suggestive of the fact that we're not going to have a deficit budget, which with its attendant negative economic consequences. Perhaps the most interesting thing about the budget is the massive job creation the budget intends to achieve, which by extension will reduce extreme poverty and hunger, together with reducing insecurity like piracy, militancy, restiveness, agitations, and others, including the insurgents. As a hungry man is an angry man that can become ready tools in the hands of the security threatening groups. There is no better alternative to the development and diversification of our economy than actually a stoppage of gas flaring in the country, but harnessing them to improve our power, which is the engine room that drives scientific, technological, and industrial development in any nation. I therefore advocate for a setting up of a commission that will oversee to this so that they can swing into action immediately and fast-track the harnessing of this gas to guarantee the production of enough power to produce goods for export and domestic purposes. Let me equally commend Mr. President again for signing the international treaty for the stoppage of gas flaring, which actually, portends very big hope for the reduction of gas pollution, global warming, and others, with the attendant negative implications like climatic change, which affects our agricultural production adversely.
Thank you so much, Jude. Jude really has really followed on, and I believe you have heard what he said there. Let me allow Samuel to finish, then you take on from some of the concerns raised by Jude. Okay.
Yes, to conclude, I think I would like to suggest that companies interested in being part of this project that intend to go to the Niger Delta to implement this project should consider not just carrying out CSR projects in the host communities, but equally, why not give a percentage of equity to the communities? Let them feel a sense of belonging, that they are part of this project. Let them be those that will protect your infrastructure, ensure that your installations are not tampered with. It's an advice. Please just don't depend on JTF or security personnel to go in there and think that, you can do what some of the companies are doing currently in the Niger Delta. Finally, what I have to say on this is that consider the host communities as your partners. And that is the way that I think things are going to work better for all those that intend to be part of this project and go down to the Niger Delta to execute the projects.
Okay, before I go to Justice, we have this caller from Abuja, Prince. Hello, Prince. You're on to Tuesday Live. Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening, please.
Good evening.
Go ahead. We can't hear you. Good evening.
I greet everybody in the house. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Yes, Prince Benedict Onyewenye again. I must commend Mr. President, for having, taken this giant stride. You see, the topic we are discussing here is a very, very important one that should be looked into. You see, having gone through the budget and every other sector that got its prizes, we just noticed that areas have to be considered. We've gotten a lot of them: education, health, and I didn't get to hear of infrastructure. Where is the bill coming from? But now, gas flaring is something that I haven't, discussed. That will generate employment, will create a lot of money, will make Nigeria come out of from the servant of the oil production. We've got people and the mechanism to work on this. But is the government in place willing and ready to see these things achievable? I see that if this government is actually willing and ready and has the zeal, by now, despite that Mr. President presented it outside the seashores of the country, but by now we should have had committees set to look into this gas flaring. Because most importantly, let me tell you, the people of Niger Delta are very calm. There are certain regions of this country that it will happen, they will definitely shut the economic system of this country. See, it will be so bad that our brothers and our sisters are languishing within poverty. Their health system is going down every day. Agriculture is nowhere. They buy things at high cost, and then some countries, some states in Nigeria are benefiting more than those who risk their lives, who produce, who have got. See, now let me tell you this: if President Muhammad Buhari will consider that certain programs, projects, and policies that should be in place should be done in his government and in this present time, honestly, Nigeria will see, and the teeming youth, the teeming population of this country will benefit with a lot of policies that are coming out from brains, from people. I advise him, and I advise all the members of his cabinet, that they should look at Nigerians at heart. The suffering of this country is getting too much and too alarming. And let me tell you, a government that has debt profile accumulating and it's getting higher by the day, it is regardless internationally. Let us try to position Nigeria where it's supposed to be in the Committee of Nations. Nigeria, a giant of Africa. Giant of what? Is a giant of population, or giant of poverty, or giant of what? We should consider all the things I think we should put Nigeria through. Thank you, gentlemen, in the studio. I would like to work with you people. I believe that the conscience of one man is the conscience of all. And if everybody, even those in Lagos, if everybody should come to a round table for discussion, honestly, Nigeria will step faster, over time, away from all these anomalies that is facing this and bedeviling this country.
Thank you, Prince. Well, you already have a partnership there.
Yes.
So can you react? So we'll go to Lagos and come back here.
Now to attend to. Now, to respond to one of his concerns, government is serious and committed to addressing the issue of gas flaring in the oil and gas sector. And to make him understand that there is a governance structure of the Nigerian gas flare commercialization program. And that is why this program is directly under the office of His Excellency, the Honorable Minister of State, Chief Timothy Silva. So he oversees this program, and it is part of his priority area as number 3 to address this issue in line with Mr. President's commitment at COP21 in the United Nations Framework Climate Change Convention, where he agreed to reduce gas flaring. I heard Mr. Balami talked about policy and policy implementation. Yes, indeed. One of the bane of this country's problem is implementation of policies. We have laudable and amazing, wonderful policies. And so if you look at what Mr. President did, when he made that commitment at COP21, he came down to Nigeria and ratified that commitment and even went ahead to approve the national gas policy. Now, very many people, I'm speaking to the audience that haven't read the national gas policy. You can Google it online, and if you go to Chapter 6, Section 6.4, from page 60 to 64, it specifically talked about what government is planning to do regarding gas flare commercialization. And which is why government said they will work collaboratively with the industry, with technology providers, with flare capture provider and third-party investors and financiers to make sure that this issue is addressed once and for all. Beyond that, apart from policy, Mr. President now, through the highest decision-making body, which is the Federal Executive Council, approved the Nigerian gas flare commercialization program to underpin government's policies that this is real business. And so this is what the NGFCP is all about. Now, to cap it all, to make sure that the NGFCP does not just back, but if it backs, it can bite, Mr. President approved the gas flare commercialization regulations. And what that regulation does is that it changed the game of what has been happening over the years. It warped into line the producers. It increases the flare penalty from 0.03 cents to $2 for those producing more than 10,000 barrels of crude oil per day, and 50 cents for those producing less than 10,000 of crude oil per day. And in that regulation, Mr. President said any oil company that did not give us accurate gas flare data, you will pay a fine or you go to jail or both. Now, why is that? We need investment-grade data to give to these third parties we're bringing in to get it so that they can take it to the banks. That's to try to reduce some form of uncertainties Mr. Samima talked about, and try to do some form of de-risking. So when we sat down during the design of this program, for once, a family of three sat down to say, let us look at this. Why is this problem on and on? So the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, and the Department of Petroleum sat down to say, we must address this hydra-headed monster once and for all. So they looked at the institutional memory and said, oh, we need to give a teeth to this initiative. And so the regulation came in. So they looked at it from a commercial, from a legal, from a technical, even from a developmental standpoint to say, what will make this program fail? So we hear a lot of pundits say this program will fail. It's one of federal government initiatives that have failed. This program will not fail. And I'll tell you why. When we did the design in line with the support of our development partners. UK's David Foster, represented by Mr. Charles here, we used their gas flare tracker to have an overview of the gas flare situation. And then the Department of Petroleum Resources, working with the World Bank, came up with a template that we designed, and at the end of the day, we found out, as opposed to 140 flare sites, we have 178 gas flare sites in this country. And then we've now moved beyond that to now say, okay, so let's begin to progress this. So the USAID now gave us the technical partners in terms of financial and technical support through the Power Africa project to design the transactional and commercial structure, where we will now give competent third parties that have the wherewithal to come and play in this space. So all of these issues were looked at. Now, there is one other thing to address Samima's concern, and of course the other callers. We know that projects have issues. Now, all over the world, in terms of project design and project implementation, we found out that 78% of projects fail as a result of stakeholder, strictly related to community stakeholders. So what we did with this design... Yes. So host communities, yes. Host communities. I know where you're coming from. So now what we now did is that as part of the design, we said every project coming under the NGFCP will contribute a community development fund for the host communities. And this fund will be managed by what we call a management committee that will comprise of the communities and the project, and then there will be a government entity that will be administering the gas sales agreement, in this case the Nigerian Gas Marketing Company, to sit as an observer in that committee. Now, why are we doing this? We're trying to co-create, co-own, and of course, co-progress this program with the community and the projects, so that what Charles talked about, those conflict entrepreneurs will not have a say. So the project will succeed, and the gas flow will be reduced. That will implement generation. Now, let me let you know again that with this NGFCP, we're going to unlock around 600,000 metric tons of liquefied petroleum gas, which will give 6 million households clean energy, the closest ally to renewables.
Let me hold you there.
Please.
Let's go to Lagos. Let me start with Mrs. Sidiego. Given all what we raised, the beautiful projections, what are your concluding thoughts?
My concluding thoughts are that we cannot allow this project to fail, and I want to elaborate on that a bit. Now, as we have said earlier, the journey of gas in Nigeria only began to take definition when we had the Associated Gas Reinjection Act of 1979, that first of all then began to request for specific plans for gas development on any oil project. If you look at the provisions of, well, first of all, there was the fact that that compliance didn't happen much because the penalties didn't make sense in the scheme of things. But if you look at the penalty regime in the current NGFCP regulations, as well as the fact that there is no room for flaring on greenfield projects, what it means, and embedded even in that whole regulation, is a statement that talks about the fact that not only do we want to achieve flare down, but we want to make sure that we move out of the conversation around flaring and even get into the development of our NAG resources, our non-associated gas resources. Nigeria is a country, yes, that has 202 TCF of gas reserves. We know this. But there is also an upside potential of about 600 TCF. And this is mostly non-associated gas that we haven't even begun to talk about. If you consider the benefit of one single MSCF of gas to this nation, then it's important we get even past this flare conversation and begin to actively exploit our NAG resources. Therefore, we can't allow this project to fail because it has a wider ramification. This is Nigeria in the scheme of things in Africa. We have 16% of Africa's population. We are contributing about 15.5 up to 16% of Africa's GDP. We have the largest reserves of gas in Africa, over 37% of that. Yet when it comes to production, we are nowhere in the scheme of things, barely doing less than 10%. Now, when you look at the projections for global gas growth, Africa is actually projected to exceed that percentage. We are projected to be growing at about 3.5%, whereas global gas growth is about 1.3%. What does this mean? The outlook is that increased industrialization and productive activities on the continent are going to generate the kind of development that the various nations need to see. If Nigeria does not step up to its game, we will not go back to that position as the giant of Africa. And gas is that one lever that we have. I'm so sorry, he has spoken to the fact earlier, the fact that, we have the natural resource. This is our raw material we can use to transform this economy. We cannot afford to get it wrong. When we make this project work, we open the door to every other gas development project and remove the flaring conversation ab initio, so that every project is coming with a gas utilization plan, with a gas resource management plan, with a plan for zero flare from inception. So I hope that all the parties will continue to work together. It is not seamless. And as the NGA, we're also speaking to the government to say we need to then deal with some of the other systemic issues that are plaguing the gas industry broadly. Otherwise, those who get into investments in the NGFCP also come in and face some of the challenges we are facing. Challenges around the sanctity of contracts and so many other issues. So as we're trying to make this project work, it's also imperative that the government is partnering with the NGA, with the industry practitioners, to make sure that we address some of those other lingering systemic issues. The gas industry must be profitable, must be viable, and it is that one resource that can change the economic trajectory of this nation. There's no gainsaying that. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much. Let me quickly take on Bala. Bala, in just one sentence, Madam says the project must not fail. And most Nigerians will be surprised today. We are just talking about gas, gas, gas. One sentence, concluding thoughts. Concluding thoughts.
We are on the right track. The continent of Africa is looking up to Nigeria to lead. The global community is looking up to Nigeria to lead the continent of Africa. The leadership in the country has shown honesty and transparency in making sure this program works. The only thing we can do is to support our government and make sure we remain as that leader and the continental hub of Africa to the global community and to humanity.
Thank you very much. Let me quickly thank Mrs. Adre Jo Eziebo, President, Nigerian Gas Association. It was good having you tonight on Tuesday Live. Having you tonight. Yes.
Thank you very much.
And also Bala Zaka, public analyst. Thanks for joining us on the program tonight. Thanks for joining us on the program tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, back in Abuja, let me start with Samioma. Conclusion.
This project is long overdue.
It must not fail.
And it must not fail. And also let me say that the Niger Delta deserve much more from the oil and gas industry. This project, I'm hoping, will help to finally transform the Niger Delta and let it be seen as an oil and gas producing region.
Thank you.
We want to see that.
Okay. Charles?
I think my view is that this project perhaps encapsulates the notion that you must think globally and act locally. We need to change the fundamental way that we deal with hydrocarbons. Climate change is a reality, okay? Just as lack of employment in Nigeria is a reality. This program kills two birds with one stone. It is a liberating program. It must not fail. It will succeed. It will liberate millions of people. And I'm blessed and happy to be part of it.
Well, I know if I give Justice the next 2 hours, he will go on and on and on. Justice?
Yes.
Cap up.
All right. The Nigerian gas flare commercialization program has come to stay. Now, what this program will do, and of course, thanks to Mr. President, who has given us a marching order to reiterate his commitment to say, I need this program to succeed and make sure you avoid every form of slippages you've had in previous months. The Honorable Minister of State Petroleum Resources, His Excellency Chief Temple Silva, has again called on us and said, I am capturing gas flare commercialization program as one of my priority areas, and so it must not fail. So on our part, we're telling our critical stakeholders across board, NNPC, DPR, the Oil Producers Trade Station, the IPPG, the Independent Petroleum Producers Group of Nigeria, and other critical stakeholders to say we must get all our hands on deck and make sure that this program succeeds and, of course, usher in the desired benefits. Job creation, over 200,000 direct and indirect jobs. We will unlock LPG, around 600,000 metric tons of LPG, giving 6 million households clean energy. We will create, we will trigger around $1 billion GDP impact on the nation's economy. And the 22 million tons CO2 we have made, if we take the carbon market after it's been collectivized, it will give us around $500 million. So gas flaring is inimical to our health. It causes environmental concerns, and apart from that, it's a wastage of natural resources. And that's why Mr. President and the current administration said enough is enough, that we must put teeth to this program to make sure that if people think we cannot bite, we can bite, and we will bite when the need comes for us to make this program succeed, and so it will succeed.
Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. And the assurances are clear that Nigeria gas flare commercialization program has come to stay. The fears have been cleared, and the Nigerian Gas Association, they are ready to engage and interface appropriately. And they use the word, say, international what?
Think globally, act locally. And that's what we're doing. We're acting locally, but we're thinking globally.
Thank you so much.
So to use that, please, I would like to use this opportunity to thank our development partners, starting with the UK's Department for Foreign Development, FOSTA, for all your support and, of course, allowing us to use a gas tracker. I want to thank the USAID through their Power Africa Program Initiative for all the technical and financial support. And, of course, the World Bank's GGFR, the Global Gas Flare Reduction Initiative, for all their technical support that they've given to this program, which gives teeth to say, at the end of the day, they now said that the Nigerian gas flare commercialization program, the way it is designed, is innovative, is scalable, and the first of its kind. It's a game changer that could be replicated in other gas flaring countries. So we are setting the pace.
Thank you very much.
Nigerians should be proud of that.
Let me quickly thank Inemo Samiama. It was good to have you on the program.
Thank you.
And Charles Majomi.
My pleasure.
Last but not least, Justice Jerry Faka.
Thank you for having me.
That's it on Tuesday Live tonight. We looked at harnessing Nigeria's gas for wealth creation. We thank you all for your calls, for your questions, for your concerns. And tonight, because of the heated discussions, we could not take the tweets. We assure you, by next program, we will take the tweets. On behalf of all of us, thanks for being part of the program tonight. Bye-bye.